Shalom and welcome. I am Lee with Fiery Faith Ministries, and today I have the pleasure of introducing Andrea L. Sims, who is a dear friend and sister in yahuah that I met through the grace of yahuah, and in his perfect timing, having both of us meeting in Dr. Stephen Pidgeon's Sefer Telegram and Shabbat groups. Over the years, she has become a dear friend and a vital part of our prayer group at Fiery Faith Ministries in our Telegram groups. Reading her two books, The Imposter Effect and The Truth About the Lies, The Journey of a Recovering Imposter, I have an even deeper admiration for her and the journey yahuah has put her on. I am already inspired reading what her colleagues who reviewed her books had to say, such as Robert Nash, PhD, who stated, the French philosopher Francis, and you'll have to help me with this, Andrea, is it Rocher Foucault? Did I do okay?
That's pretty good, yes.
Okay, good. Once said, you cannot stare straight into the face of the sun or death. I would add that it is equally difficult to stare into the face of being an imposter. Andrea L. Sims has taken the risk and emerged with a book that is courageous, self and other revealing, and above all, inspiring and compassionate. I love how she notes that she often thought the first book she would write would be titled From GED to PhD and Beyond. I can relate 100% to this. In 1987, Andrea graduated with her BA in English after 17 years of working towards that goal in the midst of marriages, divorces, child rearing, and jobs. After graduating, Andrea moved her blended family to Seattle, where she spent 5.5 years busy years earning a master's degree and founding an alternative junior and senior high school for inner city homeless youth. She now resides in Colorado with her sister. She's a wonderful artist and gifts many with her Aharonic blessing in watercolor. She truly is a blessing to all of us who know her and love her. Andrea has 4 children, 13 grandchildren, and 23 great-grandchildren. I am so honored to have her here on Fiery Faith Ministries platform to begin a 3-part series where she will read her second book, The Truth About Lies, The Journey of a Recovering Imposter, in its entirety. We will have a live question and answer after each reading, where we will welcome everyone to join in the chat and ask questions and give comments. Welcome, Sister Andrea. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Lee. James said something yesterday in his program that seemed so powerful for me. He said, Yah is awesome. He doesn't need me to be awesome. He needs me to be obedient. So that's what I'm being in doing this project. Yes, being obedient is not always easy, but it's the right thing to do, and we'll just see what Yah does with it.
Absolutely.
I would like to read a note that I wrote to the reader from my book. You, reader, have had a prominent place in my life for the past decade as I have sat at my desk, placed my hands on the keyboard, and poured out my heart to you. From my research on the imposter phenomenon to my personal journey that mirrors it, I have learned much about myself, about others, and about Yah. I may never know what my words will trigger in your heart as you relate to what you read. But as Watchman Nee says, when the Ruach HaKodesh reveals a need in our lives, he also provides the answer to that need if we have ears to hear. My prayer is that what I share is the answer, at least in part, to your need.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I'm so blessed to hear those words, and I know that everyone here is blessed as well. and I'm just very excited to be on this project with you. And if
Thank
you're
you.
ready, I will
Yes,
add it in.
I am ready.
Okay. I'm going to add in your introduction, and you will read. I'm going to remove myself from the stream so it will be you, but I will scroll the words so everyone can read along with you.
Okay.
Okay.
About lies. It just makes sense to me that in order to have what is known as a lie, there must be a corresponding truth. Once we come to see the lies we have believed, we have some decisions to make about them. One of them is to decide what is more important to us, being right about what we think we already know, or discovering truth. I face that question daily as a researcher, so I dig a little deeper than the literal or logical understanding of what is being uncovered. That search has led me in some interesting directions. I checked out the scientist. Scientists have done the best they can with what they think they know about the human condition, how we got here, and what we're really all about. I don't doubt that most are intelligent and sincere in providing a picture of the story of humankind. They encourage us to look into their mirror for answers, but by their own admission, their metaphorical mirror has been, quote, cobbled together, refined, reinvented, crafted, and then reimagined and reinterpreted. If that isn't enough, they go further by saying that when that mirror becomes broken, new information that replaces the old understanding, they keep busy by, quote, gluing it back together and today trying to keep it clean. If I were to ask, what is it to be human? The answer they provide is dazed and confused, not the answer I was looking for, nor the answer that satisfies the longing of my heart to know who I am. And then there's the storyteller. From our earliest childhood, according to Booker, stories were our link to the world around us, giving us an initial glimpse into ourselves, whether we knew it at the time or not. Picture books verified the familiar sayings that a picture is worth 1,000 words to our innocent and vulnerable inner selves as we, as children, absorbed and assimilated impressions and ideas and feelings that were unspoken but deeply powerful as our personality developed and our identity emerged. In those metaphorical mirrors called stories, we see our inner selves and the physical world. For fortunate ones, stories become the center point and highlight of the time spent with the inner circle of family and then with early childhood caregivers. We took it all in, and all humanity has done from the beginning. We are storytellers. We have stories, and storytelling is common. I have read that there have been great societies that did not use the wheel, but there have been no societies that did not tell stories. And then we look into ourselves. I ask myself over and over why I need to clarify my identity. I looked in the mirror hanging in my room, trying to see beyond that reflection. Over the past decade of researching the imposter phenomenon, I more clearly see that my distorted identity emerged from what I learned from science, from what I read in books, combined with what others had said to me and about me, leaving me secretly feeling sad, lonely, and forgotten, even insignificant. As a teenager, I felt rejected, isolated, and abandoned, and no one knew it. The seasons of my adult life have been too varied to associate specific words, as they are still unfolding. But I know I'm leaving behind those imposter feelings of insecurity, inadequacy, and fraudulence, and moving toward peace and contentment, becoming who I was created to be. I had some personal discoveries. Now, I'm clearly not a psychologist or an anthropologist. I'm not a literary critic, neither am I a theologian. I'm just a thoughtful woman, a woman full of thoughts, refined in the fires of life, impassioned with the love of discovery, and devoted to Yahusha, the Hebrew name for Jesus, my family and my profession. I'm the kind of woman who thinks and plans ahead, who breaks through fear barriers given some time, which I needed for this, who believes that what she does must reach further than the thing just done, who habitually multitasks even when she would rather not, who is surprised when creativity surfaces in her life, and who embraces blurred lines and soft-edged thinking. She also finds herself connecting bits and pieces to make something new. She sits in the back of the room whenever possible, withdraws and turns away when in the presence of celebrities, and still wears a hoodie and carries a backpack, even though it's silver. I'm the kind of woman who finds herself outside the box in most areas of my life, who is always early, except when a grandchild calls and needs to talk, and then her world stops until the conversation is over. She loves football and roots for the underdog unless the home team is playing. She sets up rules and deadlines for herself and then beats herself up when she doesn't reach her goals. But she's working hard and making progress in replacing perfection with excellence in what she does. And I have been a woman who has been dazed and confused, even as a believer when confronted with questions of identity, because science had no satisfactory answers. The storyteller, while entertaining and informative on some topics, did not ease the deep longing of my heart to know who I really am either. So my process. I've come to better understand my own process of internalization. As an adult, when I view something, I interpret what I'm seeing into words that are in agreement with what I know at the time. My understanding of what I'm viewing then passes through the filter I've created within my intellect, and I store those words, or I discard them. My mind's filter is composed of facts and ideas and feelings and is ever changing. Everything I take in passes through my filter. When I hear something, I translate it into the words that are in agreement with what I know or think I know. My filter's activated, and if I store the words, I also store the feelings that are attached to them. When I wrote my first book in 2017, The Imposter Effect, A Closer Look by a Classic Case, I had a clear idea of my issues based on the research I had encountered on the imposter phenomenon. I did not, however, understand what to do about them. Yes, imposters flourish in spite of their fears, but the inner suffering is always there, waiting to ruin whatever is being accomplished or finding success. So I began to list the lies from the vignettes of my life. At the time I wrote those stories from my memories, I did not yet understand the seeds that were planted or the sprouts that would come from them. But over the course of time, from the discovery until now, I have made some connections, leading to some surprising discoveries. There are lies hidden beneath the stories I wrote, lies about who I am. As I work through the process of replacing those lies with the truth, I wonder how many of you have been living with a distorted sense of who you are because of the lies you have believed about yourself. My hope is that as you walk with me on my journey of discovery, you will begin to see some of the lies buried deep in your memories that surface. So remember, your now time determines your next. I then encourage the readers of my book to take a moment and capture your thoughts. My first chapter. That's the title of this chapter. It's also the title of my life at this point, from birth to 25. The lies as seeds. You've probably heard that old saying, sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt you, haven't you? Who do they think they're kidding here? Some people must believe that old saying because they fling words out as freely as candy from a passing float in a parade. Before I realized how damaging words could be, I did the same thing. But I've come to believe that words can wound or heal us. They can free us, they can feed us nutrients to live on, or they can poison us. I wrestle with the love-hate relationship with words, seeing them as little seeds that grow and develop over time, either for good or bad. Reflecting on my earliest memories, I discovered these words were used as weapons that wounded me. Innocence in young children is a beautiful thing, but their internalization process, yet to be developed, leaves them vulnerable, unable to distinguish what to let in and what to discard. As parents, as mature adults, we carry the responsibility of helping the innocent construct a healthy filter leading to a truthful identity. I fear the guidance we need happens too rarely. For some imposters, it is largely lacking, like it was for me. And the result was a growing incongruence between how I saw myself and how the outside world saw me, which inflicted upon my inner self a silent and hidden suffering, resulting in a misshaped life and a misdirected path. It left me feeling like a fraud, like, let's see, like an imposter, yes. The bottom line is that over the course of my life, I have believed lies about myself, even if I didn't know it at the time, like the following. And there are 11 lies that I uncovered as I did the research and the stories that surfaced in my memory. The first lie, I was unwanted. Now, I have no way of knowing at the time of my conception if I was unwanted or not. I just know that I grew up feeling a little out of place in my family. And as the years went by, these feelings intensified. I didn't have clarity on that feeling until I saw that the lie that it was attached to. Please note, the lies create feelings that are real in themselves. They are just not justified ones. So the truth that came was from the word. For you did form my inward parts. You did knit me together in my mother's womb. Psalm 139:13. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being formed in secret, and intricately and curiously wrought, as if embroidered with various colors in the depths of the earth, a region of darkness and mystery. Your eyes saw my unformed substance, and in your book all the days of my life were written before ever they took shape, when as yet there was none of them. Verses 15 and 16. Well, you can imagine my joy on that day when I discovered this truth about myself. It was several years after I had come to know Yahuah personally. He had been unfolding my new life as I was able to apprehend it at the time. Not long ago, I began referring to him as Abba, instead of addressing him by the title of Lord, without really knowing why I had made that shift. I know now, and I'll talk about that in my Torah testimony. One morning, I picked up Strong's Concordance to find out where in the word Abba is used and landed in Romans 8, quote, you have received the Ruach Imats, the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father, verse 15. Paul goes on to reassure those of us who need reassurance. The Ruach itself bears witness with our Ruach that we are the children of Yah. He's still unfolding his love and care for me even after all these years of knowing and loving him, which now is about 6 decades. I no longer feel unwanted because he exposed this lie and replaced it with the truth. Lie number 2, I have a big mouth. I stood looking up at my grandparents, my grandfather and my grandmother, as they discussed something about finances. As a first or second grader, I did not understand it, but I blurted out a family secret I overheard somewhere along the line. hoping to add something to their conversation. You could use the money you are saving for Ellen's college. The conversation ended abruptly, and they both stared down at me as if I had just appeared out of nowhere. You, my grandmother said, have a big mouth. Then there were looks back and forth, and I think I must have faded into the background, not knowing what had just happened, but feeling the impact of it. At the time, I was too young to know what to do with those words. I'm sure I thought something, but I'm sure I thought nothing, but felt something, and that something went deep into my inner being. This specific memory remained buried until I began to draft this chapter, and that raised so many questions for me. Did those words alter my identity in some way? Would I have become such an introvert if this exchange had not occurred? Is this when I began to understand that children are to be seen and not heard? Am I quiet and withdrawn in a crowd because of this? Did I begin unconsciously holding my breath during times of stress because of these words? The truth. Decade after those words were spoken and then forgotten, I came across Psalm 81:10. I am the Lord your God, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide, and I will fill it. This word spoke to me in that moment and remains strong even now. Just last week, as I was drafting this chapter, I put these two words together for the first time, my big mouth and opening mine wide, and realized I had just uncovered another lie and discovered the truth to replace it with. When that revelation came, I forgave my grandmother and intentionally chose to believe what Yah said. This is the action I took in my now time, leading to my next. So, even as I write, and even as I'm speaking now, I'm opening my mouth wide so that he can fill it with his truth, not only replacing my lies, but perhaps helping you take steps to replace some of yours. Lie number 3, I have to be the best. I remember a time when I felt great pressure to perform. I was in 3rd grade and having beaten every student in the class at random multiplication problems on the chalkboard. I then faced our teacher, Mrs. Dickinson. We were standing side by side in the front of the room, poised to write our answers. As she gave instruction to the class about what I'm not sure, I silently calculated the answers by glancing sideways as she spoke. When the command came to begin, I quickly completed the first 3 or 4 problems before she did and ended up winning that race. Now, I don't write this story proudly, but it is indicative of my inner self at an early age. I eagerly competed, needing to please, to be the best even then. It's a common trait in those of us who grow up to be classic cases of the imposter phenomenon. In a normal family, I suspect that an achievement like this would have resulted in a conversation with parental insight on how to view it and how to feel about it. But that didn't happen at our house. My parents neglected to bring my siblings and me up this way, so we missed the benefit of the way it should be. Train up a child in the way he should go, teaching him to seek Yah's wisdom and will for his abilities and talents. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Proverbs 22:6. Consequently, later, I had no path to depart from. A growing incongruence between how I saw myself and how the outside world saw me left me feeling like a fraud, an imposter. Lacking guidance, I wandered around, finding my own way, making a mess of my life in the process. But Adonai, the Lord, reassures those of us who know him that he restores the years the locusts have eaten. Joel 2:25. He makes all things new. 2 Corinthians 5:17. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. Psalm 103:12. As we come to know these things, we can and must replace the lies with the truth in order to become who he created us to be. Lie number 4. I am a failure. I don't know why I chose to take baton lessons the summer after I turned 6. Lots of other choices existed in our little town, which had a blossoming recreational program. Throughout the summer program, each age group worked on a specific routine that would be performed as we all marched in the culminating summer event in our community, the Labor Day Parade. Even though I was a beginner and only 6, I was chosen to lead the whole troop in the parade. Excitement and fear filled my days leading up to it. A new white majorette boots only added to my swirling emotions. The day of the parade came. I was placed out front with reminder of the plan. March for 6 blocks and then stop. Perform the routine in that intersection. March another 2 blocks and do the routine in that intersection, repeating the sequence to the end of the parade. I remembered looking up into the face of the director and listening intently to her every word, nodding my head to the rhythm of my pounding heart. Our troop was somewhere in the middle section of the floats and between 2 bands, one providing cadence for marching and the other playing music for the routines. All went well until we came to the first intersection where we were to stop and perform our much rehearsed routine. I turned around and gave the signal to halt, which we all did, but when I turned back around, I panicked. The band in front of us kept on moving forward, leaving us behind. Everyone was staring at us. The music support from behind wasn't loud enough to hear to do our routine, so I quickly turned toward the troop and gave the command to start marching again, even stepping up the pace in order to close the gap between the rest of the parade and us. I did not stop again as I had been instructed to do. I just kept marching, keeping up. When we came to the end of the parade route and turned the corner where we all were to assemble, I was met with an angry outburst directed solely at me. The questions came to me in rapid fire. Why didn't you stop? What good was all that hard work if we didn't get to show it off? Tell me what the heck you thought you were doing. I'm sure there were lots of other kids around, maybe even some adults, but I didn't see anyone. My head was up, my eyes met hers, but there was a grayness encircling me like a wall. That numbness manifested in my red face and ringing in my ears. I wanted to run, but I stood there, still, silent, until I could get away, and then I did. I don't remember how long I ran or even to where. The truth. I think this experience, along with others like it, shaped me to be a rule follower, and this trait has caused me both suffering and success. The key is, of course, whose rule are we following? And whose rule can I safely ignore? I go the speed limit for maybe 4 or 5 miles above it, and I don't need to tell you how many cars zip by me at their first chance, many giving me the famous finger as they do. I know I must be in the minority in this area. Okay, then I can handle that. You can imagine perhaps how excited I became when I discovered that the Torah, the law of God, has been written in my heart. Proverbs 3:3, 7:3, Isaiah 59:21, and Isaiah 31:33. I can follow my intuition, measured by a peace that passes all understanding, Philippians 4:7, as my guide to his rules, and it has felt like freedom to me. Lie number 5, I don't deserve it. All those little seeds of insecurity and anxiety planted at home and at school during those early years remained dormant for a time. After our family moved from our grandparents' house into our own house across town, I remember going next door to see a new batch of kittens in our neighbor's garage. I was probably about 7 years old. Our neighbors were an older retired couple, and their house was peaceful and quiet. I remember wanting to stay there for as long as possible, They were different from anyone I knew at the time. Her face was kind, and his voice was gentle and soft. They both seemed to have had the same expression on their faces whenever we kids were around. I think it was pity. Mostly, though, we just met one of them in the garage so that we could play with the 5 Siamese kittens in the box near the door. One of them was black with a white face, I recall. I named it Blackberry and loved it as if it was my own. We didn't have pets at our house. We didn't have peace or quiet either. The absence of those two things in my life left me believing I didn't deserve them. I lacked the goodness within to merit pets to love and peace to enjoy. The truth. The Lord continues to comfort me with his word, for it is by grace, Yah's remarkable compassion and favor, drawing you to yahusha, that you have been saved, actually delivered from judgment and given eternal life through faith. And this salvation is not of yourself, not through your own effort, but it is the undeserved and gracious gift of Yah, not as a result of your works, nor your attempt to keep the law, so that no one will be able to boast or take credit in any way for his salvation. Ephesians 2:8-9. As I came to understand later and continue to appreciate more and more, I don't have to earn his love or deserve his gift of salvation. Lie number 6. I shouldn't stand out. I was sitting in a circle in our classroom along with 7 or 8 other advanced 3rd grade readers. Our teacher, Mrs. S., was leading a discussion on a section of our reading book. There was a slight pause, a noticeable one, and then she spoke in a different tone. Well, she said, who do you think is like that in our class? She asked, looking smugly around our little circle. We all looked up at her as she stood towering over us. She was pencil thin and straight, with a long nose and small eyes. Her lips always seemed to be pursed. Do we have a Captain Bossy among us? She repeated, pushing a little harder for a response. Now, 3rd graders are still of the age and mindset to want to please their teachers, so we were all trying really hard to come up with someone who might satisfy her. I was looking around at everyone in the reading group just as they were doing. The remaining students in the class outside of our reading circle had picked up the scent of something coming. Silence fell upon all of us. Then our reading group began looking beyond us to others out there who could be the one. I looked down at the book in my lap and began to flip back through the pages, trying to remember what the story had to do with this. Captain Bossy, there it was, the title of the story we were discussing. Well, let me help you out here then, she said as she stood taller. Half turning to include the whole class, she proceeded to describe one incident after another where some child in her class had done this and this and this. I didn't recognize the offenses, so I just sat there waiting like everyone else for the pronouncement. When it came, I was dumbfounded, if a young child can be dumbfounded. It was me. I had no idea what I'd done, or when, or where I had committed these offenses. I fell into a numbness and smallness I had not known before. Mrs. S. instructed my classmates to call me Captain Bossy until further notice, and I spent the next 4 days in a kind of cultural hell that I couldn't escape from. Too embarrassed to tell anyone at home, who would I have told, and what would they have done anyway? And too horrified to fight back, even verbally. So I endured it by getting to school late as possible, spending recesses and after lunch in the bathroom stall, and running home as fast as I could by myself. On the 5th day in that little reading circle, Mrs. S. announced that perhaps Captain Bossy had learned her lesson, and they could dispense with the title. And they did. My classmates seemed to just go on with their little lives as if nothing had happened. But something had happened to me, something I couldn't understand, something I still struggle with to this day. But the truth, I now understand that we know with great confidence that Yah, who is deeply concerned about us, causes all things to work together as a plan for good for those who love Yah and to those who are called according to his plan and purpose. Romans 8:28. When I find myself in a leadership position, this truth moves me into an awareness that sensitive humility combined with responsibilities of leadership prevent me from slipping into what might appear as bossiness. Lie uncovered, lesson learned, new awareness, servant leadership resulted. I have stopped trying to figure out his ways as a counselor would. Romans 11:30. The lie, number 7. I must always be prepared. And boy, did I feel this one reemerging with this project. The Captain Bossy story exposed another lie that I had believed about myself. I had to be ready for all eventualities that came my way. The effect of this lie pressed me to consider all that could happen and prepare for the possibilities, if not physically, then certainly emotionally, leaving me exhausted. Seeing this at work in my life, I understand now why I came down with chronic fatigue syndrome. The truth. And discovering the truth about myself that I don't have to know ahead of time all that might occur or be required of me has allowed me to recover. I now know that he is my help in all circumstances. I, Yah, will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you who are willing to learn with my eye upon you. Psalm 32:8. Lie number 8. I am alone. Wyoming in late August is a hot and desolate place. The elementary school I attended bordered our backyard and provided a quiet desert, complete with heat waves and wind gusts, an unfriendly refuge where we spent a good bit of our time since moving to the new house on 15th Street. A familiar and awkward tension met us at the back door, intensifying as we settled in the kitchen where my sisters and I silently sat around a small table after being called in for supper, going through the motions of eating tomato soup and saltine crackers. A conversation in the living room continued, then escalated. Go ahead and get your damn divorce if that's what you want. I was 10 years old when our mother left us for another life in another state, taking with her the only facade of normalcy we had left. The next 6 years spun me around in a confusing whirlwind, beginning with the housekeeper who was hired to be there for us when our dad was out of town for work. This stranger, who's somehow supposed to replace our mother, spent her time cooking for her family with the groceries purchased with my dad's money. She didn't last too long. Then came stepmother number 1 and a son born of their union. She did her best to provide a home for us, considering she was only 18 at the time, just a few years older than me. We loved her, but she didn't last long either. Upon arriving home from visiting our mother one summer, we walked into a dark and empty house. She had taken our little brother and gone. Some time later, our dad married again, this time to a woman with 2 little girls. I was too young to fully understand that his actions came from good intentions. He was trying to provide a family for us. What I acquired was a guarded heart and a sense of instability. Stepmother number 2 didn't last long either. A lull ensued before stepmother number 3 appeared. She brought 3 little girls with her, and our life changed drastically. We felt overlooked, pushed aside after a time of adjustment, and ended up seeking refuge with our grandparents across town. By this time, I was 16 and a sophomore in high school. Those who knew me then would be surprised to discover how different I felt inside from how I appeared at school. Being surrounded by a group of friends and staying active in a number of clubs did not alleviate the loneliness I felt. The truth. I did not know it at the time, but Yah was at work, preparing to show me that I was not overlooked or alone. Although my mother and father have abandoned me, yet Yah will take me up, adopt me as his child. Psalm 27:10. Years later, this truth would sink in and heal my heart, allowing me to forgive my parents. I also discovered that yahusha was the firstborn among many brethren, and I was among the many. Romans 8:29. And he will never leave me nor forsake me. Hebrews 13:5. He even says this about me. They will be mine, says Yah of hosts, on that day when I publicly recognize them and openly declare them to be my own possession. That is my very special treasure. I will have compassion on them, and I will spare them as a man spares his own son who serves him. Malachi 3:17. I did not know or understand then the depth of these words. Even now I revisit them to remind myself. Number 9. I just ruined my life. The telephone rang and I immediately answered it because I'd been waiting for that call for hours. My heart pounded in my ears as I spoke. Hello, yes, this is she. I remember turning my back to the rest of the house and finding myself staring at my own reflection in the floor-length mirror at the end of the hallway. Small for 16, not yet fully developed in many ways, and still with braces on my teeth. 5'1" and skinny, barely 90 pounds. My dark blonde hair was pulled up in a barrette, and my green eyes stared back at me. I held my breath and listened. Okay, what's the next thing? I exhaled partially and swallowed. Next week, yes, I will. Then I hung up. A week had passed since that call, and I had continued throwing up every morning. It was not easy to conceal such a thing when there were several females sharing a bathroom, but I tried to hide it. I could not face what I knew was true. But here I sat with my best friend Meg, for support, in the doctor's office waiting room, about to go in, petrified. Once inside and settled, Dr. C, our family physician, leaned back in his chair and with my chart in his hand, said smugly, "You know, girls," addressing us as if we were both in trouble, "this would not happen if you would just keep your knees together." Quite a statement. I felt the color rise in my face, surge back through my body, and then crash onto the floor like a wave in heavy surf. I wanted to disappear. Speechless and stunned, I couldn't even turn my head to see my friend's reaction. And really, I don't remember anything after that. I don't know what else was said or how we got out of there, but I walked out with the knowledge that I was definitely pregnant and that I definitely hated that doctor. After facing up to the fears and informing both families of my condition, a wedding was quickly planned for immediately after graduation for him, and school was out for me. I entered another whirlwind and didn't land on solid ground for more than a year. So there was no easing into womanhood for me. It seemed one minute I was a 16-year-old high school student, and the next minute I was a wife and mother. I finished my sophomore year of high school but never went back, and no one from the school ever contacted me. I replaced Latin club, future teachers, honor society, marching band, cheerleading, student council, with diapers, formula, sleepless nights, and unpaid bills. My heart was empty. My days were full. My need was great, which prepared me for what was to come next. I found myself at 17 years old with one baby in the crib, another one on the way. I suffered from morning sickness throughout the day and had a husband who didn't care about me or the babies he had fathered. In his mind, I was a failure in the kitchen. I didn't cook like his mother, and I was a failure in the bedroom. I was not the sweet young thing he wanted me to be. I was exhausted, depressed, and uncomfortably big with child. The mobile home we lived in sat on a bluff, miles from town, mirroring the isolation I felt. My high school friends had gone on with their own lives, but mine seemed to have come to an abrupt halt in the middle of nowhere. About the only thing I knew was that I loved my babies. One October morning, I remember opening up the little half window on the back door of our trailer because I had just finished another round of vomiting and needed some air. I stood looking out over that bluff for a few minutes, breathing in and out. And then I lifted my eyes and spoke aloud these words, and I remember them as if it was yesterday. God, if you are up there, please do something. Now, those were not words common either to my thinking or speaking. I was not raised in a religious setting and knew virtually nothing about spiritual things. I was reacting out of desperation to some deep anguish and helplessness within me. I must have closed the window and walked away without giving it another thought until a few weeks later, when I found myself sitting in a little church. In the little town where I had gone to school. Someone had invited me to visit, and I had attended several times. At the end of this particular service, the pastor simply stated the following as I remember it. If you are here and don't have Jesus in your life but would like to, come forward and I'll pray with you. I didn't know what that meant, but I found myself with the almost to term baby in my womb waddling down the aisle to be prayed for. After he prayed and dismissed the congregation, he shared a couple of things with me, which I don't remember at all. It was then that a high school friend of mine, who was in the choir of the church, approached me and said she was happy for me and that several of her family members had been praying for me. I said, I wanted to come forward before I was just. The words were no sooner out of my mouth when I heard a still small voice inside me say, no, you didn't. That's a lie. It startled me, not only because it was true, I had just lied, but also because a voice I had never heard was coming from inside me. The voice didn't shame me. It instructed me. The truth. I have been brought back over that incident so many times, and I'm so thankful that Yah used my lie to prove to me that something of significance had just happened. Over the years, I have come to understand it more fully. I now understand he promised to instruct me and to teach me in his way so that I would know how to follow him, even counseling me as he watches over me. Psalm 32:8. This new life I have been given as a gift is an ongoing process of hearing, believing on an initial level, and then hearing in a new way and believing more deeply than ever before. I knew I loved my babies even before they were born. I didn't know for some time that they were a blessing from Yah, actually called the fruit of the womb, and a reward. Psalm 127, 3-5. I'm not saying that I was rewarded for having conceived a baby before marriage. The children are called fruit and a reward. What I'm saying is he knew my future and has allowed my children to become an amazing blessing in my life, for which I am so thankful. Because of his gracious gift of them, my mourning about my early life has been turned to dancing. Psalm 30:11. Proving that all things that have happened to me are working for good. As amazing as that truth is. Romans 8:28. Another thing I've come to know more fully is that we are created in his image. Father, Son, and Ruach. When we are born naturally, we are three in one. The Ruach, the Nefesh, and the body. But our spirit is dead, not functioning as Yah intended. The soul is the faculty that allows each person to operate the three great powers given to us as human beings: to think, to feel, and to choose. Our body acts as a tent to cover the person we really are. When I came into agreement with Yah that Sunday morning about who he is and about who I am, to the extent possible for a newborn, something happened to me. My Ruach was quickened. His Ruach HaKodesh came into my Ruach, and I became his child. The Spirit in me has opened up a way for communion to take place, for my conscience to function like it should, and for my intuition to be heightened. I've spent the decades since that morning coming to know him. That morning, my life changed. I didn't do anything to deserve it or to make it happen, other than to cry out in my need. Need does that to a person. But it was only the beginning of an unimaginable journey of discovery. Therefore, if anyone is in yahusha, that is, grafted in, joined to him by faith, in him as Adonai, he is a new creature, a new creation, reborn and renewed by the Ruach HaKodesh. The old things, the previous moral and spiritual condition, have passed away. Behold, new things have come, because spiritual awakening brings new life. 2 Corinthians 5:17. The next few years were not easy ones, but I dearly loved my now 3 little ones and buried myself in their care. I had forfeited my education and had been abandoned by my husband. A line in French's book echoed in my mind. There are so much easier ways to destroy a woman. You don't have to rape her or kill her. You don't even have to beat her. You can just marry her. In many ways, I felt dead, even with the spiritual awakening I had experienced. Abandonment had taken its toll, but I didn't stay dead. I began to come back to life when I started preparing for the GED. So there I was, 21 years old, sitting on a park bench watching 2 of my 3 little ones playing in the sandbox while I studied for the high school equivalency exam. The baby was asleep, and I was thankful for that. The sun felt good on my bare legs and arms. June in Wyoming is pleasant. I was trying to concentrate on a column of vocabulary words listed in my study guide. Inundate, deluge, unequivocal. But my mind kept drifting off. I am tired of the little gray house in the little gray town, and I need to change desperately. I need to pass this test. I cannot end up like so many other teen moms, living in a trailer park, surviving on food stamps. I had many fears in those days, some understandable, some not. I worried ahead, much like those who pay it forward. I created scenarios in my head and then wasted my emotional energy fretting about them. My fear of the unknown future was at times more powerful than my stress of the known reality of the day. I didn't yet know that my future was in his hands. For I know the thoughts and plans that I have for you, says Yah, thoughts and plans for peace and well-being, and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. Jeremiah 29:11. But I would discover it in time. I passed the test and received the GED, left the little gray town, and began a new life. Line number 10. I was just lucky. 2 years later, I relocated to a college town in northern Colorado and began looking for one job where I could earn enough money to support my children, because having 2 just didn't work well for a single mom. The interview on campus could be my answer. I sat in the outer waiting room, trying to breathe and keep my nervous stomach from growling too loud. I fidgeted in my chair, rummaged in my purse, tucked my hair behind my ears, all unconsciously. Every 20 seconds or so, I looked at the clock. I was finally called into the office of the assistant director of Student Center and sat across the desk from him in one of the overstuffed chairs that formed a conversation area. The room had a soft glow to it from the lamp nearby. After a few introductory interchanges and a brief overview of my short resume, Mr. Davidson stood up. My heart sank as my prospects faded. The interview was over, but he was just moving from behind his desk to sit down next in the chair to mine. Tell me a little bit more about yourself, Andrea, he said. My hopes revived, but my mind stumbled. What do I tell him? What does he want to know? I took a deep breath. Well, I'm really interested in this position. I'm a quick learner, and I'll work really hard, I continued, hoping I could come up with enough words to convince him to hire me. I've only been in Fort Collins for a few months, and I'm searching for a position where I can grow. I heard that if you work full-time, you can take one free class a quarter. Is that right? Without waiting for his response, I blurted out, I didn't finish high school, but have a GED, and I really would like to go on if I can. I have 3 children to support on my own. He was listening and thinking at the same time, I could tell. What more can I say? I didn't have a long list of experiences that could help me. He broke into my thoughts and said, You did very well on the initial testing that we do for civil service jobs, Andrea, as he glanced through the folder he was holding and then said, I have a couple more interviews to do before I make my decision, but we'll get back to you by the end of the week. Well, I got that job, working in the activity area of our student center at the university, where I spent the next several years working and taking classes. At one point, Mr. Davidson recommended that I seek financial aid to pursue my degree full-time and set up the necessary meetings for me. I went through another battery of tests and must have done well because I was offered a full scholarship that included tuition fees, books, and supplies for the time necessary to complete the bachelor's degree. I then applied for financial aid to help with living expenses. Not long after I started working, I learned that Mr. Davidson had recently married a woman with 2 small children. How lucky for me that he was the one who interviewed me. The truth. Yes, it looked like I was just lucky. However, the truth is that we make our plans and walk forward with them, but Yah orders our steps. Proverbs 19:21. He opens doors that no man can close. Revelation 3:8. And once he opens them for us, they remain open, even in our faltering and getting off course. After about a year, my boss arranged for more testing, and then I became a full-time student, part-time employee, much more than I could have ever hoped for. Lie number 11. I'm just like my mother. I was still trying to find my way and take care of my children at the same time. I was not yet 25, and I had a 3rd grader, a 2nd grader, and a preschooler. Saying I was overwhelmed would have been an understatement. The 2 older children needed costumes for a school play, and they needed them tomorrow. Did I know this before today and it just didn't register? Had I no memory and no time? We'll think of something. I remember telling them while wondering what in the world that something would be. They were only 11 months apart and were not in the same grade, but they were in the same play at their school. How can I get off work to go and be there for them? What good is my silent vow to not be like my mother now? I was a single mom working and going to school myself. Stacks of books waited for me on the card table that I used as a desk in my bedroom. 8 of them requiring reading for an adolescent lit class, and the rest for the 4 other classes I was taking that semester. I awoke from a fitful sleep, still without a solution to this wall I had encountered, with no idea how to get past it and move on. Both of them were to be little animals that crawled across the stage. What did I have in the apartment that I could use to create little animals? It was very quiet as we quickly ate our cereal and gathered up our stuff for the day. We still had about 20 minutes before we had to leave the house, and I was vacillating between just not caring because I couldn't seem to fix it, and wanting desperately to come up with something appropriate. I finally pulled out 2 black garbage bags from under the sink, cut holes through their heads and arms, and drove them to school, where later I would watch in quiet humiliation their struggle to get across the stage. The whole scene left me with a sick feeling, knowing that both teachers and parents alike knew that I had let them down, and knowing that the kids were embarrassed, I could feel it. It's been a very long time since that day, but I remember it so vividly. Each time it comes, I want to change the ending, but I can't. The truth. I suffered with the memory of that day for years because I couldn't undo it. I know it sounds unkind to want so badly not to be a repeat of my mother with my children, but the truth is the truth. I felt it acutely. With the childlike understanding of being adopted by my Heavenly Father, my Abba, I could hope to be like Him, a new creation clinging to His promises. I was so thankful He forgives all my failures, Psalm 103:3, and that He covers me. With His mercy and loving kindness, Psalm 103, verse 4, in my weakness and wandering off, He remains long-suffering, 2 Peter 3:9, even restoring the years, and I had several, that the locust devoured, Joel 2:25. During the research for my dissertation, I stumbled across some legal documents containing my mother's original signature that stopped me in my tracks. A great sadness welled up, surprising and unsettling me. I collected my thoughts, and a few days later I wrote about it in my journal, recounting it as it happened. To take a break from my reading, I sat down on the cold tile of my office in married student housing, pulled out the bottom drawer of the file cabinet nearest the door, and began rummaging through some of my personal files I'd managed to preserve over the years of moving around. The wind is howling outside, and clouds are causing a shadowed darkness to fall over this part of the campus. The dissertation is underway and taking shape in my mind. In fact, I think of little else these days. Writing a personal narrative takes courage, the experts say, and I am living proof they are right. Eagerness and apprehension live side by side in the current place of possibility. Sleeplessness sometimes joins them, and I can hardly hold back the emotions that came in the night, so deeply are they connected to my memories. As it is as if they are one. Am I calling forth the emotion and then the events follow? Or do the little scenes that surface bring with them those oh so familiar feelings? And even though the circumstances differ, the feelings seem to all be the same. I don't know exactly what I'm searching for going through that drawer, but I need to gather documents to help me formulate a timeline of my life. That may seem elementary to some, but many things have happened over the years, and I forget in which order they occurred. I know myself well enough that to do anything with details, I first have to have a grasp of the whole. Old employment applications, along with a file where I keep a record of birth dates and marriages and deaths, will help me. I find a few things of importance and feel moderately satisfied at the progress when I come upon a file labeled Inheritance. I open it and find the certificate of death for my mother. It's a telling document, but up to that moment I hadn't given it much more than a quick glance and a resting place in my bottom drawer. She died on September 4th. I remember it well. I was working on my English undergraduate degree, just about to finish up, and had to miss the first week of class. I don't think I ever caught up on that semester. Starting strong is everything in my world. I was also managing a low-income apartment complex. I think there were 22 units, which meant there were 22 issues on a rotating basis placed at my door. I remember wishing I had more to give to those in need, but if the truth is to be told, and I am purposing to be truthful here, I was struggling to survive my own life. The name on the death certificate does not match other documents I had seen. like her 7th grade report card from a school in Texas. Her date of birth varies too, proof that she had lied about her age when she went into the military and beyond. I think she lied about a lot of things. They listed as immediate cause of death and a secondary one, but I could add a few others unofficially. I flipped through the rest of the papers in the folder until I saw a typewritten note addressed to the girls. It had curtly scripted instruction, including this last line: just divide what you want and give the rest away. It was signed, Your Mother, in a beautiful cursive scroll written in blue ink and dated. It was her signature that stopped me. I was holding the original paper she had held, reread, and then signed. Her signature touched me in a way I had not expected. I put the paper back in the file back in the drawer, and I went back to my reading. I need to keep focused, moving forward, making progress, leaving the past in the past. Some years ago, I came to terms with my relationship with my mother. I didn't really ever know her as some daughters know their mothers. The memories of her during my early years are the ones that surfaced, which surprised me. I do remember one thing clearly, that when we were little girls, she made us Jell-O. Not just any Jell-O, though. It was lime with whipped cream, crushed pineapples, cottage cheese, and walnuts. I think we had it fairly often, and not for any special occasion, as I recall. When my children were young, in an act of honoring her, I began making it for them. And over the years, it has developed into a family tradition, gracing our table at Thanksgiving and Christmas. Now my children are making it for their children. I never eat it without thinking of her. The commandment to honor your father and mother, found in Exodus 20:12, takes on a whole new meaning when you put it into action. I found a place of forgiveness in my heart for my mother. I had no idea what she'd experienced in her early life. She never talked about it. I did not know why she found it so vital to drink. When she was drunk, she cried. When she was sober, she raged. Then she left. Later she died, poor thing. I wish I could comfort her and tell her again that I love her anyway. Such a small thing, Jell-O. Such a big thing, forgiveness. The truth about forgiveness is that we forgive because he forgave us, Matthew 6:9. It frees us to love unconditionally, even if after the fact, for some of the people in our lives, they may never know we have forgiven them, but he knows, and we know, and that's all that's required. Take a moment and capture your thoughts.